Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who was afraid of trolls until he met a griffin and learned what fear really is.
Oh, man. Sorry, June came in right at that moment and started making sounds. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did hear that, yes. And
Good
so
work,
did the audience.
June.
Well done, June. And my co-host is June.
Tim Longo and June.
Tim Longo Jr.
Hey, June. Nice. Well done.
Thank you very much. We, of course, if you're hearing about trolls and griffins, we are talking this week about Rogue, the text game that started it all back on the mainframes in 1980, as far as the genre of roguelikes goes. And I played a couple of hours of this week. I don't know. You played a couple of hours. How much further did you get?
I consistently couldn't get past level 7. I did it multiple times, but nowhere near where you got to. Despite my attempts. How far did you get?
The best I did was level 19. And then I ran into a griffin, the one and only time, and he ate my face. I believe it was 2 hits. And I had something like 63, 65, something like that hit points.
Oh, wow.
And it went super fast. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I wished I had like a wand of polymorph maybe, or I don't know, any number of things that would have helped me. But I was not prepared for, I ran into a griffin. Oh, I'm dead. So it was rather quick at that point. But now, next time I go, I'll be more aware. At this point, I think I've met everything but 4 creatures. I believe there's one for every letter of the alphabet. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was thinking that V was for Venus flytrap, but now I'm not so sure. I wonder if it was F for flytrap, and whether it's the V I didn't get. I'm because I'm like, V for vampire would make more sense, but all the undead are at the end of the alphabet. So let's see, what else did I find? Did I not find? D, which I have to assume is dragon. We just went through this before.
M, you mentioned you hadn't.
I hadn't run into an M, which I suspect is like a minotaur, and then I think X is the only other one. I think there's only 4 that I have not seen and fought. There are some things that you don't die to at all, ever. There are 3 I can think of that don't do physical damage to you.
Like a leopard? Is that a leprechaun?
Leprechaun. The aquator doesn't do any. Equator? Maybe it's supposed to be equator. And the nymph is another thief. A nymph will steal magic items. The aquator rusts your armor if you're wearing metal armor, which you start off wearing, ring armor. There is a ring that will prevent that. It's amazing. Everything has a counter, but of course you don't get everything in every run. And so that kind of leads us straight to one of your topics, and then we'll get into mine, which are kind of unwieldy. So you had said beforehand, in your, let's say, designery way, that there is a process of desirable item assessment. Please describe what you mean for the folks at home.
I was hoping you weren't going to repeat it and we were just going to kind of riff on it. But, well, I mean, it's obvious. It's probably an obvious point for Rogue games, and seeing that this is Rogue, it's even more obvious. But because I don't play them that much, but I know of them and have dabbled. It's like with this one in particular, because it's, I don't know, one of the harder core versions of the game type. The way that you end up playing is so much, for me, was so much dictated by what I was finding, and vice versa. And so sort of like assessing what you have, and I don't know if it's the best strategy or not, but if I found a new potion or a scroll or something, or a wand, I would use it immediately just to see what it was in case I found another one or whatever. that bites you from time to time. But once you know what it is, or say, which I gave the example of finding a two-handed sword early on, right? It's like just it's so funny how the game can so not fundamentally change, but pretty profoundly change when you find certain things early in the game. From I'll say the first 4 or 5 levels. You're like, oh, what do I have? Well, for me at least, because I didn't get as deep as you did, but at that point, I'm like, okay, what do I have? I'm going to have to change. How many cursed things do I have on me? Okay, and I'm going to have to rely on arrows for whatever reason or such and such. But or the one that I started like really seeking out or hoping that I would get was the identification scrolls,
Of
because I
course.
wanted to know if something was cursed or not. And so there was one run where I got two in the same level, like a level 3 or something, and I couldn't be happier. But it's like it's like two of the whole, it could be the only two in the whole game. It's just so weird. But it's just so impressive too that those variables can mean so much and change so much for you based on how it happens. So you can see why it's sort of like stood the test of time in a way, right? And spawned so many other games.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I definitely, I would find, like a scroll to improve my weapon. There's one that vorpalizes your weapon. I don't know what that means practically. I thought it was just like +2/+2, which is still good, right? But it's, like, I don't know if it has a chance to insta kill or something like that. I was like, wow, there's a scroll called Vorpalize Weapon.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot. Does it do better for swords? Like, anything is possible now. Is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
is and that those kind of wild combinatorics are super interesting as well. Um, but yeah, I found the same. I came up with a lot of different rules for myself in terms of when I would use things. I
Mm,
still don't use wands a lot. I still tend to identify them, and because I haven't identified many of them yet, I don't know what the balance of good and ill is in them. Like, I found a light one once that was super useful because I would just walk into a room, light it, and now it's like now I can see everything. Um, I came up with all sorts of rules for how to navigate the spaces. Um, and I'll read some of these individual strategies in a while. But I too found myself, um, changing how I played based on what I found early. Um, but I think those strategies stood me pretty well. I mean, it took me a while, to be honest, to start
right.
picking
You
them up.
learn lessons
Yeah. For
essentially.
example, only read scrolls after you've gone downstairs, because the scroll you read might be a map, and you want to do it on a new floor, right? Until you find the mapper. Like, sometimes you find a mapping scroll, so you want to make sure you're always reading those right when you've gone downstairs. It's like, yeah, because you
Interesting.
can wait. Um, you should try potions just after gaining a level, because there's a potion that levels you up.
Yeah, I
So you
got one
want
of
to, like,
those. Yeah.
yeah, so you want to have just leveled when you do that. If you so once you get to level 8, I think is where they start. The equators are the ones that rust your armor. Uh, I don't think they rust the leather armor, so you can put leather armor to fight them, or you can just take off your armor on level 8, and put on armor when you see stuff that is tougher, like a centaur or something like that. I say always fight a leprechaun. Uh, experience points. Experience points are more important than gold. So the leprechaun, if you don't kill it before it hits you, it will steal money from you. But,
Yeah.
like, what do I care? Like,
Yeah.
I have a high score table, filled with Rodneys. I don't really care. What? I mean, it's meaningless. The gold
Gold is only score, right? That's like
Gold is purely score as far as I've seen, unless, well, so now I'm imagining, well, there's also a dragon. Maybe you can buy him off. So, like, who knows? Um, Other things that were more about the space was, like, I try to retrace my steps and stick to the walls. So the
oh,
reason being,
yeah, what do you mean?
right? So you go into a room, it's a certain shape. I tend to feel out the shape by going around the sides, and then I go alternating lines down the walls. I mean, to cross the space, because wherever you walk, you get the 8 directions around you, right? To see. So as you walk around, you'll spot items on adjacent tiles. So you don't need to touch every tile when you cross through a room, when you go in a room. If it's dark, especially, right? It's kind of obviously in a lit room, you can see what's there and you can just take whatever path you want to get to it. But in rooms where it's dark, but even in rooms that are lit, I tend to stick to the walls. And the reason being that there are spaces that are trapped, that leave you on the level, or that drop you to a level below, which means you might miss out on some resources. So the reason why I stick to the walls is it's easy to remember that path. Like, oh, I came in and I moved to the left and I moved down, right? Instead of trying to remember, I zigzagged up to this item and then went through a door on the north side. I'm never going to remember exactly what path, especially on the 200th game. So just having a kind of mental algorithm for how I'm going to traverse a space, so that I can just look at a room and say, okay, going into this room, this is how I would go through this room, was super helpful. It meant I hit fewer traps.
So did traps become traps? It sounds like you were afraid of traps quite a bit.
I was afraid of traps the further I went down, because you get down to like level 16, 17, and you've got trolls, and it's like those bear traps. Sure, they're a nuisance early on, when it's like the worst that's going to happen is an emu is going to come and bite on you while you're trying to get past it, and you can kill the emu. When it's a troll and you really, really want to run away because trolls will really, really hurt you, it really stinks to get stuck in a trap. So that was one reason. But also I tended not to want to, I didn't want traps where I fell down levels, because first of all, you often take damage, and second of all, that means you're not getting the stuff on that level, depending on when it happens. So that was the bigger concern I had, was I'm going to find a hole in the floor and I'm going to fall down and I'm going to miss out on food, or, I've starved several times,
Yeah, food's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and actually we should probably talk about that. Well, let me touch my last couple. Don't spend forever searching. Generally this is about map, understanding the algorithm a little bit. For example, no wall has more than one exit. They might not have one exit, but no wall has more than one exit. So like, that tells you about what you need to search. If you get to a place where you can't find the exit or the stairs, that what rooms you need to search on the basis of what walls. So don't, do the same sorts of things that you do to navigate a space to search. And search 10 times and move on, because, at some point you might have to come back to it, but it's better to move around. The corollary to that is actually don't even search until you've exhausted all your known paths,
right?
Because that's just a waste of time and therefore food. And then using choke points to your advantage. Door, stepping one step past a door is a perfect place to stop and deal with slime, because if it splits, it's going to be into the room you just left, and it has this natural choke point that it's going to keep coming at you, and it'll give you a fighting chance. Slime are slow as well, so you can run away. But yeah, it's just stuff, all these kinds of things that I just picked up, again and again and again, playing and being like, oh yeah, that's right. I could use a scroll and this could happen. So it's better to use scrolls when I first go downstairs, or whatever. So I just ended up picking up things like that. Geez, June. And then the thing you mentioned about the food, the interesting thing for me about this game is, of course, that's the thing that keeps you moving, right? Is you're going to run out of food. So that's the thing you have to be constantly thinking about.
Looking for?
Yeah, looking for it, but also you just can't like constantly rest and like heal up,
Yeah. I was making that. I think I was making that mistake, because I would use rest a lot to try to get my health back.
Yeah, you really have to thread that needle of the risk reward you want to kind of push forward. You want to try to exhaust every floor because there might be food there. There is a potion or a I think it's a potion to detect the food, but I hardly ever find it. So that's super useful, but you want to find the food if it's there because it's a deep dungeon, and I definitely have had runs where I'm like, oh man, I'm on level 17 and I'm fainting every 3 steps because I'm out of food. And of course, if a monster comes on me on those levels and I'm fainted, I'm dead. So the pressure is keep moving, find food if you can, but keep moving, because you don't want to, yeah, you don't want to get stuck down there without food because you also are going to have to come back. So yeah, it's brutal.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
brutal
yeah.
game.
Well, I mean, that's like a pipe dream as far as I mean, getting
Yeah.
getting to the amulet is enough.
Yeah.
But going back out, yeah, yeah. I didn't. I mean, I think I had a vague recollection of the importance of food, but it's like until you're fainting and the zombie comes upon you, and you're like nothing you can do. It's. I mean, I guess that's sort of a tenet. That's also like it's a tenet of survival games these days, and to some degree, it's like food is. I mean, I play a lot of Valheim, as you know, and
Yes.
and at the end of the day, like food is it's so simple, and they have survival games tend to have a lot of systems and mechanics that go into food. Zelda's and Breath of the Wild's another good example. Um, but it's just so funny how it becomes so like the cornerstone of your existence, which is of course, yeah, okay, that's important for real life too. But in a video game, you'd think it'd be like so cumbersome and
Well,
the
and it often is, right? I mean, and even in this game, of course, it's taking up inventory slots. I mean, there were games where I had like 8 food, but it's like every time I come across a magic item, I'd be like, okay, well, what do I want to drop to pick up and see if I want this magic item, and then to put that magic item down again because it turned out to be a poison potion or something like that. Right? I definitely had that weird like, well, I definitely don't want to drop the food, so okay, I'm going to keep the food because it's a long, deep dungeon,
yeah,
but it put this weird pressure on inventory, especially as I got more of it, um, or it put a pressure on traversing spaces quickly. So that's another reason why I kind of have rules for myself about how I would cover spaces, is because I basically wanted to do it efficiently, right? Because especially if
yeah,
I was low on food, it's really important to see all the squares in the room in case there's food there, but also not to spend more effort doing that than absolutely necessary.
yeah.
Um, so super important, strategy for getting further. Like I won't even say getting all the way there, but certainly further. So
Well, yeah, and I mean, regardless of what weapons or armor or whatever special other things you find, like just the distribution of food alone, right, can change. It's just like as you're talking about, it changes the pacing and like we talked about earlier, the assessment of how you're going to approach stuff. It's like I haven't found a lot of food so far, so I really have to I really have to act differently. The other thing that I didn't remember being so important, but there's it's the dungeon crawl metaphor of like that balance of how much you're going, like you do, like you said, XP is more important than gold at the end of the day. You can't just race down levels. You kind of, I mean, who knows how it's actually balanced, but you do have to level up as you go or you're just not. I assume that was my
yeah,
experience, but I
yeah.
didn't get as I didn't feel the tension of level 19, but I can imagine you're pretty tense at level 19 where you're probably a little worried about what you're well
Yes.
obviously you
Well,
found a griffin, but
I was already worried about trolls, right? And I'm like, oh no. I actually the first time I ran into an invisible creature and then died and discovered it was a phantom. Of course, I never saw the letter because I couldn't see invisible creatures. There's a ring for that.
nice, nice.
But I ran into the phantom, and it turns out if you can figure out which direction it is, you can still hit it despite it being invisible. It's hard, but you can, and you can survive it. But I was like panicking and running away because like I'm being hit. I don't know from where. I guess I'll try to find the stairs. And the same thing would happen when I would run into trolls, which I'm guessing regenerate because that's a troll thing, right?
Uh
Because of course this is all D&D stuff, and
Need
trolls
fire.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe. I mean, probably be nice to have one of those wands or staffs of fire at that point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just was like, and with the Griffin, when I encountered it and feeling that pressure of like, I'm on level 19. Oh, okay, I've got up to this. Okay, let me see what my sword does. Oh, I'm dead. Like, it's just like, I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
oh man, I ran away from trolls on level 17 and on level 18 to get to here, only to get into a thing where I was like, oh, I wish I had known to run away.
It's oh man, I hate to bring it back to Dark Souls, but it's that whole information is power, right? Like
Yep. Oh yeah.
it's just like you're adding to your, I mean, by the way, I loved your strategy list that you
Thank
went
you.
through, because
Thank you.
it's like that's like
It's hard. It's hard won.
you're making it as you go, you're making that list, and you're finding these common themes that you have been succeeding with. And the next time you see a G, you're going to be like, oh no,
Yeah.
what do I need to
Maybe
do here,
maybe I should run to the next level. That's what I'm going to say.
yeah, but then there's always going to be another G,
Yep. Yep.
it's like but it's just yeah, so fascinating that that they have been able to, I think, with that decision, which, man, I really hope we get to talk to somebody about this, but with that decision of making things so opaque, I guess as a text game on a mainframe, they had to do it that way, really, in a way. I mean, no, they didn't have to, but it's like reading a lot of text. I assume you're not really downloading manuals with those games,
No. No. No.
so I want to talk about that as a, maybe it's a takeaway for me, but as a maybe another subtopic of like, constraints are good. We know constraints are good, right? And the fact that the environment that they were building this game in and the constraints that they had dictated the design to some degree. Even the run-based nature, I assume, is part of the constraints. Because
I
you're
mean,
not,
possibly. I mean,
they're
adventure
good.
is like the precursor, right? A few years before, that is not that. Like, adventure is just big and complicated. There's just a lot of stuff in that linear bespoke
Could
game.
you save that game though? I don't remember.
Could you save Advent? Probably not.
It's more of the
What you
just,
saved was your map. Like,
yeah, yeah. Oh, you're
in,
memorizing the pattern, but the pattern's always the same. Yeah.
exactly right. It's
So
just
they're,
there
yeah,
is literally a map, like an
yeah,
infocom game,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like a modern graphic adventure game. There is a I mean, I
yeah,
made that for Space Quest or King's Quest,
yeah,
more so than Space Quest. Yeah.
yeah.
So
No, and I remember that when we played Colossal Cave Adventure, that there is this sense of you are chipping away at what your options are and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing the
right.
path, essentially.
Right. And
Um,
you might, and you probably will die, right? I mean, that is like
yeah,
you'll run into something, or your light batteries will run out, and you'll be like, well, now I'm going to get eaten by a grue, which is, I don't think, the thing that actually happens in Advent, but it's something sort of along those lines of like, okay, now I'm going to stumble and die, or whatever it is. It's been a while since I played that thing through. But it's that, it's like the darkness is deadly, and so
yeah,
when you have no batteries, you're done for. So there becomes like also that game is exploratory, but you're exploring a known space and you're finding a solution, basically,
like
right?
Mist. Yeah,
Yeah, like Mist. It's
yeah,
and the pressure against that is some limited resources. There is an enemy, this enemy dwarf, who will like try to stab you and steal your stuff and things like that. You can deal with him too, though. He's also a puzzle element. I think you can also kill him, although I don't remember how. So like there are all those things. But it's always the same. It's always the same game. So
yeah, yeah. And this one going, yeah. So I mean, it's just, yeah, okay. So having been somewhat inspired by that, etc., the fact that they went in the sort of opposite direction where it's run based. I mean, there's no need to save. The whole fundamental design of it is you have to do this in one run, and we're
right,
going to mix things up. But it's like at that point we don't have to. It's like we wash our hands of it. It's like
yeah,
there's no. Yeah, there is a save in the Steam version, but I'm assuming that was added later. But we the original version. It's like we just gave you this sandbox and toolbox. It's like,
Yep.
good luck. It's going to be random every time, and it is it's immediately strangely addictive, even in this form. I think
Yes.
to just like, especially because of the procedural nature of it, because you're like, what am I going to find? Starting the first room with a hobgoblin or something.
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
you're like, what?
And am I gonna get a
Um,
lucky hit in and like,
yeah, yeah.
immediately go up a level maybe, or whatever. It's like that too. I mean, I've found treasure rooms on the first level, where you
Oh
know,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you've
I
run into
found
a
one
treasure
too.
room. Yeah,
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 I got teleport. I used a potion or a scroll and teleported into the treasure room, but there were also like five monsters in there.
exactly. Yes.
But I had two of them, so I teleported out.
Oh, beautiful.
I was like, "Oh, this isn't good. I'm not going to survive this." So I just happened to have two of them. So,
Awesome. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great. Yeah. I mean, so you already also see this as the anecdote factory, right? Is like,
yeah,
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 there's this one time I discovered a trophy room, but it's because I teleported in and I had another one. I mean, it's a great little
yeah,
story,
yeah.
right?
Oh, and
I
there's nothing like I found. I think it's a potion, or it must have been a scroll. But one of the things, I had a cursed armor on. Yeah, it was cursed armor, and then I used the potion or scroll, and then it said my armor was glowing for a moment, and then it stopped,
uh-huh.
and then I went to try to take it off, and the armor had turned to not be cursed.
Yes.
And that, like, those moments, because cursing is such a big, I think that's one of the design flaws in the game, is that it's I guess
Unfair.
it's not because you have, yeah, it's just, it's
Yeah.
very unfair. But
Yeah.
you have identify scrolls. It's just, they didn't really tune and balance that stuff, like, to the point of what, and I'm, not having made a roguelike, and the modern ones that are so, beloved, like Splunky or whatever. I really am curious, maybe this, they probably don't do it in this game, but if there's ever any waiting for items that are going to pop up,
Oh,
versus
I'm sure
completely
there's
random,
writing.
because what
No,
you
it's not.
find can propel you so
Yes.
much
Yes.
that there's probably certain, like, groups of tables that are like, these things should be this percentage, these things should be this percentage,
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
modeling.
I think it's weighted in this game. So
Really?
because I feel like there are a couple things I always get and often get multiples of. In particular, the regain strength potion, which is a
Oh,
counter to
to, to
the
rattlesnakes.
rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
Yep. I get that, and usually in quantity. Like, to the point where there was a long time where I was like, well, I'm not gonna just start drinking potions in case I get one of those, because I'm gonna need it. Like, and then I'll start drinking potions when bad things have happened to me. Uh, but I've actually refined that away, because the there tend to be more of those, and then what I tend to do is like hoard my last one until I get down to level whatever it is, 11 or 12, when the snakes stop, right, or when they become a lot less frequent, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, now I can top off my I can bring my strength back, and so yeah, that and strength plus is more common. Identify is actually more common than a lot of scroll types, I think.
Yeah.
So I feel that there's weighting there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's huge. Like, I wonder, because I do know I read somewhere that they initially started by generating like the hallways and then tried to make rooms. And instead, the algorithm turned out to be better to generate the rooms and then connect them by hallways.
Mm.
Um, and I wonder if they also started with like, okay, let's here's a random item table, 1 through 20, roll a d20 every time, and found that it was impossible to beat. Like, because right, I can imagine
Yeah.
that being an iteration of like, okay, it was 1 to 20 or whatever it is, however many items there are, 1 to 26. Maybe they did that for everything. Like, can you imagine if you rolled into the first room and you had a griffin? It's like, okay, well, this runs over, or
Right.
whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so the level must be a variable in the algorithm to what level you're on. Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
of course. Yeah.
there are definitely monsters that won't appear. Like, I think the equator or aquator, however it's pronounced, um, does not appear above level 8. I don't think. Um, and I think
I never met one.
you never
So
met one, so
yeah.
you probably didn't get that far then.
No, yeah, I got you.
And
Seven.
Griffin, I never saw. Well, I only saw the once, and it was the only time I got to level 19. But trolls are sort of similar, where they might start on like level 16 or something. Wraiths are that way. Phantoms are that way. Like there's a class of monster that like appears at 16 and below, maybe, or 15 and below. So it's like that, and I feel like the same is happening with the items.
Yeah, yeah.
There are definitely things that feel more common.
Do do creatures do creatures drop items? Because I killed an orc once and a ring
So I think they very rarely
appeared.
drop items. I think though, one thing I will say is they definitely pick them up. So if they move through the space and they can
Oh,
go
maybe they
over a thing,
found one.
they will pick it up.
And then
Yes.
maybe when you kill it, you get it?
And then it drops it. I think when it
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay,
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. I
That's
definitely
just,
had that
man,
happen.
that's just mind-blowing. I
That
don't know
was a
why
whoa
that's
moment. That was like I killed an enemy who had
it's
picked up
just so
something I
there's
had
just so
dropped.
much more
So
going
that's how I
on than
knew
I
that's what it was. Is because I had specifically dropped something that I wasn't going to use, like the potion that confuses yourself or whatever, or teleportation scroll or whatever. I was like, I'm probably not going to use this. I dropped it, and then I went to the next room and had to double back, and then there was like a hobgoblin there. I killed it, and it dropped the thing that I had dropped, and the thing was no longer in the place where I had put it, and I was like, that's super cool.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it was amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And like you said, the God, I haven't done it yet, and I really, really want to look up lists. But maybe I won't because I like it's spoiled for me. But like it's just like the discovery variable of it. I mean, again, it goes back to things like Dark Souls or that are not even realizing they've learned from this game or games
Right.
like it, and but they have, and um, I found a kryptonite ring,
Yeah.
which is like, okay, probably don't want to put a kryptonite ring on because it's the kryptonite ring, but I did anyway. And
Yeah.
then it found and then identify later, and then I was like, oh, it's an aggravate monster. At least this one was.
You're right.
And I don't know if they're always that, but it's just
No, they're not.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah, there are definitely associations there where there's definitely been things where I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably good, and then it's not. It's like one time I got a gold potion that was the skill up, the level up
oh
potion. I was
yeah,
like, oh, cool. And then the next time I got a gold, it was poison. I was like,
yeah, they don't care.
okay, yeah. And it's like they just have table of descriptors, table of effects, and they just draw the line like an old fashioned, when you go to a diner or something, they get the kids puzzles. You're supposed to draw lines connecting items in this list to items in this list.
Yeah,
It's exactly like that, except it's just randomly. Those things I think are that I think is purely random, because I have not found any consistent thing there. Of course, scrolls are just scrolls. But yeah, there's like a billion different wand types, like an oaken one and a steel one, and
yeah, yeah.
there's some weird ring names too, where I'm like, what is a Terriolite, ring or whatever it was, just some weird stuff.
Well, and it's like, I mean, again, not going back to influences or games that it has influenced. I really, it's probably, yeah, I think Diablo is probably the best one to get credit for it. But this the procedural, gear magic item generator
Yep.
of like the blah 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 of the bear, the blah blah blah
Right.
of the
The
tiger,
moon.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just like that kind of name. That's same thing here.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it's consistent what it does, but just the concept that you're like, what am I going to get? What am I going to, the loot table, the roll
Yep.
table,
Yep.
all those sorts of concepts. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean that stuff, of course, does goes back to D&D in some ways, right? I mean, because
yeah,
there's just like pluses or whatever, so it's like, oh, I found a sword. Oh, it's a +2 longsword, right? There's sort of like, yeah, it's a sword, but what kind of sword? And then there's, and then they add more around that. It's like a +2 sword. Oh, it's a +2 flaming longsword. Like, and you just like they did the same thing,
yeah,
and here I think they're adapting that as well. In terms of what they do. But I I guess it's possible to pick up presumably swords and bows and whatever that are better, that just start better or start worse, like you've been picking up cursed items. I tend to not identify. I tend to identify armor, and I tend to identify rings first, then armor, because I'm like, well, if I use that, I'm going to be stuck with it if it's cursed, because I did that very early on, maybe like my second or third run ever. Was like, oh, I put on some chainmail, cool. Wait a minute, my armor went down. Oh no, I can't take it off. Like I definitely had the story everybody has had with Rogue, where they get their first cursed
Oh
armor.
yeah, I do that all the time. I do
Yeah.
it too much, probably.
Yeah,
I'm just,
I don't change my armor until I've identified it. So
yeah,
I don't.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably smart.
or it's been, or I've gotten down to the Aquators or whatever, and they have destroyed my starting ringmail, so that I have effectively no armor, and then I will run around in that for a while, and then just give something a try if I haven't been able to identify it. So yeah, I've had everything happen. So except dying to letters D, F, X, and whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
M.
yeah.
So I've got a few letters still to uncover in the alphabet. Yeah, but it's endlessly entertaining. I also took some life lessons from Rogue. So I have some life lessons that
Okay.
you should take away. You might remember in dorm rooms, like everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten, or everything I needed to learn, I learned from Star Trek, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
I have a poster that's things I needed to learn, I learned from Rogue.
Yeah.
Um, Number one, experience is more important than money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I totally buy that one. Yeah.
Okay. And here's kind of a corollary: keep your eyes on the prize. You're here for the amulet, not for the gold. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you just need to rest for a little while.
Yeah, love it. Nice.
It's okay to be a little hungry. Just don't let it go on too long. And then my final one is take some time and live each moment, which just is alluding to the turn-based nature. It's like, come into a situation. It's okay
Just
not to just charge in blindly. Like,
yeah, yeah.
take a moment and assess. Like, okay, I'm in this room. What's my health? Okay, there's a potion over there. Oh, it's an orc, and there's some gold. Maybe it'll run for the gold, and I can get the potion. And I can get out of here and pick up a few hit points on my way in and out, and maybe then I can take on the orc. Like, I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
if you're not rushing through it, that one I actually picked up, because at one point I was like, well, I could really use the rest, and I like held down the period, so it was repeating.
Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
do all the time. Yeah.
right, and something ran into the room and killed me before I had a chance to
Yeah.
pull my finger off the key,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's when I stopped doing that. So,
Yeah, I had that happen enough. I have a holding the button down, like in intervals
yeah,
technique
like
where it's like,
holding
oh,
it up. And, yep,
something come in, something come in, does something come in? Oh, okay, wait.
yep,
But it definitely backfires sometimes. And also like be away from doors when you do that so you can see
yes,
them as they're coming
and in lit
versus like,
rooms. Yep.
yeah, in lit rooms. Yeah, yeah. So it's just so funny that there are strategies in this game. I mean, it makes sense, but there are so many, even just positioning. And I don't know, I can't tell if you use the bow and arrow very much, but
No, hardly.
there, there are times when and it's definitely tedious, but there are times when especially early on with orcs and stuff, where, and slime too, where I don't want to be near something. So, and you can totally take things out before they get to you if you use that
Yep,
technique.
I have done it, but just not a lot, and I feel like that's something I might want to do in lower levels as well.
Yeah,
If
especially
you,
with wands and stuff
yeah,
too.
exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because I know there's a polymorph wand, and I'm like, well, that would be handy. I think there are definitely damage wands. I had a lightning wand at one point, a fire wand at another point. I think that was one that you would not describe to me last week, but kind of described me last week.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and those are the ones I can remember that dealt damage. But I think there might be a hold monster type thing,
Yep,
so
I
you can
got
give
one of
away.
those. Yep.
Yeah, and some other things like that. Maybe confuse is, I think, the potion, but things along those lines. There's
Can you
also
throw potions at things? I just thought of that
I bet
because
you
I
can.
I was like, why would I ever want to keep a confused potion if I know it's a confused potion?
I
But
bet you could
mate,
throw it.
wow, if that's true, holy crap,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
would be
I have not
amazing.
tried that, but I bet you can do that, and that's a real benefit to you for sure,
Yeah,
uh, because you can stick and move, while it's confused, and the confused potions I feel like last for quite a number of turns, like 10 turns at least, maybe
yeah,
more.
yeah,
Because when you teleport, you're often confused, but normally like 5 or 6, sort of level of turns, sometimes less. So it's probably like a D6 or a D8 or something like that. And then it feels like a confused potion can be much longer, um, like 10 to 20 maybe. So who knows what that is in practical terms, like a 4D6 or something. Like I can totally see the D&D dice behind some of the some of the
yeah,
changes.
yeah. It's so funny
Yeah.
that yeah, because they don't necessarily need to keep to the dice, but they
No,
can.
no.
But it's yeah, it makes sense that they might.
Well, it's useful for distribution, like a pure random number. I mean, that's the issue with the D20, right? Is that it's linear, uh, equal chance of a 1 and a 20. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I've always liked about those. Like Storyteller was a multiple dice game, wasn't it? Where you had like a dice pool.
Storyteller. I don't story.
Story, it's not whatever the Masquerade. What is
Oh
it?
yeah, yeah. That's an all D10
Okay,
system. You just number of D10s. But the other one is the Call of Cthulhu system, which I've always liked, which is all D6s.
all D6s. Yeah,
Number
and
of D6s. Yeah.
I feel like GURPS might have been that too. I think Shadowrun may have been that. I've played so many different damn systems. I can't remember them all and how they work. And it's been so
Yeah.
long since I played anything. But
The only problem is it doesn't often, at least in on tabletop, it doesn't often scale well because
right,
you just have,
yeah,
especially
because you
in
roll 20 dice and you're
especially
like,
in World of
yeah,
Darkness. Yeah, it's like yeah, you have 20 10-sided die that you're rolling.
you're like, let me
And it's
quickly
like,
count this up.
oh, yeah, brother. Yeah.
That's what computers are for. Yeah, that is definitely true. It's a little rough on the high end, the epic level of play. All right, I'm just gonna roll 100 d10s, guys. You come back in half an hour.
Yeah, literally your bag of dice is all D10s
Yeah,
and
and it's
you're
all
just
over the table.
dumping them out. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn to some takeaways. I was trying to find some way to put tables on that, and I just couldn't. Let's take our table aways, and do a few things. Pick out a few items. I mean, this is relatively simple game. Surprisingly deep. As we pointed out last time, I did see a lot of like the ice monsters, shooting bit rays at me and shooting wands and throwing or shooting arrows, I guess, from my bow, throwing arrows in a particular
Yeah.
direction while wielding a bow. Still a little bit cumbersome. Um, it was yeah, so more than we expected here. So I do have a few takeaways, but I wonder what you have and how much overlap there is. So why don't you go ahead and go first?
Very nice of you. You always let me go first. Yeah, I think it's a takeaway that we don't. I guess I'll say I mentioned it earlier in this episode, but it's a takeaway that I don't know if we know is actually a takeaway, but I'm going to use it as a takeaway because we can't confirm it at this time. But the concept, I would like to dream and think that because I love it when this happens in life in general, that the I guess the necessity is the mother of invention.
Hmm.
meaning their constraints, their platform, their situation somewhat influenced, I don't want to say dictated, but influenced the way that they made the game and designed the game because they did want to make a D&D type experience. Um, uh, but just the run based nature, the procedural based nature of it, um, you know, did that, I guess I'll ask it a bit in the form of a question, did that come from, you know, their circumstance? And if it did, the takeaway that even in that case, how profound of a discovery, I guess, you
Hmm.
can have when you have that a situation like that, right? It was like, oh, we had to do it this way because we needed to run base. We're not going to level up. We're not going to say, we're not going to have any persistence or whatever. So it's like, let's make it random, and it's like every time it's different. And, so just these sorts of things, it comes up in film all the time too, especially in films with special effects or what have you, right? Of like, how did you solve this problem back in the old days, especially before a lot of the CG stuff where budget, was the constraint or something, and they had to think really creatively about how to do a shot, and then still magic happens. So I just love the concept that sort of like that need for how they were going to make it could have influenced the design that now has influenced so many games. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, my first one was just someone ought to make a genre out of this. Just
yeah,
pointing out like this underlays, or underlies so many games now. And often it's interesting to kind of tie into what you were saying is that, in a lot of ways, those are sort of similar constraints that are useful for, like, there are a lot of roguelikes that come from indies, right? And part of that is, well, you can work on your algorithm and
yeah, good point.
tune your algorithm, right? But like, you only have to make X amount of content,
It's way more efficient as a
Yeah,
development approach. Yeah.
yeah, and
Same with
so,
survival games, by the way, too. It's
yep,
like fine, make systems. That's why Valheim, I think, is so brilliant.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's, so it does kind of tie to that. Is that I think about all the roguelikes I've seen or played, and they have a tendency to be by by smaller teams, right? Because they can be, and the big bespoke games, tend to be big teams, big AAA teams. And not that there aren't smaller versions of those, but they tend not to be as big or as polished, right? Just because they have the constraints they have, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that it's a great place that continues to be full of experimentation, whatever however many years it is on 43 years on, that people are still finding new things to do with this. And even though, like you, it's not a genre I play a lot of because I think I just don't have room for more than one. Like,
Yeah.
there is a part of me that wants to, because I am also, like, as a person who reads, right? It's like I like to have a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and like, those are the things I'm naturally drawn to. So those games I tend to appeal to me because they're also going to end, in a way that these don't. And so there's a satisfaction that I don't really get out of sort of mastery of the systems. Um, so, like, I'm still not a master, as I've kind of indicated with Spelunky. I still enjoy playing it, and it's partly because I'm never going to master it, and I'm just kind of figuring out when my exit is going to be from that game.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're looking for a reason to stop or
yeah,
something.
someday, I got to find my anyway. But yeah, there's a reason why we call them roguelikes, and I just wanted to reflect that in my takeaways. So,
Yeah.
next one from you.
Um, I guess I'll summarize this one as well. It's not really easy to play, hard to master, but it goes to the depth point of um, a lot of simple, clear objects clash together to create depth, and just how
Hmm.
surprised I am by that. And it's a good reinforcement of, because it's still, I think, a pretty, not to use a word that's overused in lots of media, but it's still a very compelling game to play,
Yeah,
and addictive, like we said, and it's definitely one of those one more try, one more run, and you find that in all sorts of games these days, and but they did it with so little, and were
yeah,
able to take these atomic pieces and, albeit adding the procedural nature to it, to even mix it up even more. But they, it works, right? And it's so different every time. Like, I really wonder how they balanced the game from a difficulty perspective too, or if they did, or how they even approach that. But
I hope they did because that's my takeaway. So
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I just the depth. It really just boils down to the depth being surprising, and that they were able to do so much with so little and still have it be so, yeah, so compelling.
yeah, yeah, mine is yeah, and that's definitely well said. I mean, there's a lot here. I mean, part of that depth is I feel like something we alluded to last time was like every time I see a mechanic that a monster uses, I think, oh, is there a way I'm going to use that, or is there a way I can use that against a monster, or is there a
Yeah,
way? And like every time I've asked that question, I have ultimately found like, and you pointed out maybe you can throw the potions. It's like, oh well, now everything is possible.
yeah.
You know, probably not certain other things like you can't throw a wand at something. Maybe it probably won't use the wand or whatever, um, but like, yeah, okay, if you can splash potions on everything, that opens up a whole bunch of stuff right there, right? So it's also like, yeah, they just found a way to make the most of every little mechanic they put in as well, which is efficient design.
There was a
Um,
lot of yes and in this game. I feel like
yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah,
like, yeah, we could do that, and we could
yeah,
also do that,
yeah,
and
yeah. And if we did
which is
that, that would mean we could just do this for free, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. I called mine just iteration wins. I do think that this is a game where the design and the waiting, because I really do think there is, just from many, 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 many games, that there's clearly some things show up more than others, and I think that that I think that was just a process of iterating. Like, and
Mm,
they might have, my guess would be that they started like everything's equal, but even thinking about that, I think about the old like treasure tables that were in, and I guess they're still in third edition. I don't know if they're in fifth edition, but like in the DMG, you would just have,
yeah, yeah,
like, here, roll a D100, on this row, of this chart to determine how many of what types of things you would get, and then roll again on each of these tables, like for each item, that you got. And some things were more heavily weighted than others. I don't know how far back that goes. I know it's in the
there are some,
AD&D books, so I don't
yeah,
know if it was in the books in 77 or whatever. But yeah,
right.
anyway, it's definitely a thing that was around then. So I either they, I mean, I would think because they had fewer things than those, they also had to iterate it, and determine. And of course, every time they added something, they'd say, well, how important is this relative to the other things as well? So I think they probably did that. I don't know if it all adds up to 100. If there's some internal like representation that they've used. I'm really curious about the code for these old games sometimes as well, because they had to pack in so much and so little. So I should dig out the. Though this was programmed in C, I found as well, which was kind of interesting considering C was not a very old language at the time. Um,
Mm. Well, it's like also to that. I mean, like I wrote down a note that I forgot to ask that I won't. I wasn't able to really figure out, but maybe you did. Are so every level has a finite number of enemies, and that you can essentially, quote unquote, finish killing everything on the level. Is that true, or do
no, they spawn.
they spawn? So they keep spawning. If you stay on a
Yes.
level, they will keep spawning. Okay,
Yeah, another reason that you need to kind of
move
determine.
on.
Like
Okay,
early on, I was trying grinding as a strategy, and I determined that it didn't work because of the food, right? And it was like you can't get powerful enough. You're always, walking along this knife edge. So
yeah, okay, okay. Because the reason I asked that is like to your point on tables, like if there's sort of a zero sum, if that's the right term to use, nature to it, where it's like for all 26 levels, they have run some sort of balancing algorithm that is, I guess, it's sort of like
it
an
makes it
anti,
possible to. I don't think
that it's
it's
like an
possible to.
anti-A bug,
Yeah, yeah.
like
No, I
there's,
think I think they were fine with a bugs. Like,
yeah, that you
they
just
or
can't finish this run.
actually, I wouldn't even put it that way. I'd say I bet that what they said to themselves was, well, the RNG gods might be kind, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's always a chance you might win, like, and what you're trying to do is increase that chance,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's really stacked against you. I think it's kind of like solitaire. Not every game of solitaire is going to win, and not even every solitaire game is possible to win. And I think that's a model. Those kinds of solo games are definitely a model for early computer games,
Yeah, it's a
early
kind of a
solo
what
computer
if.
games. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's just such a antithetical to,
yep.
yeah.
I know. To us, to you and
Demonic.
I, as players, yes,
Yeah.
as players and as developers,
Yeah.
it's kind
Yeah.
of like not what we do. But it's definitely. I mean, I've. It's the same thing is true of Spelunky. Sometimes you get a run where it's just like, I mean, I guess theoretically you might have chosen not to do X, Y, and Z early on, but almost always that's the right thing to do. And it meant you got to this point you didn't have enough bombs and you couldn't get to the whatever, and you know it happens, and you look at it every time and you're like, well, I guess technically that's my fault, but also I don't,
Yeah, like, but also like that's pretty
yeah.
unfair. It's
It's
like,
yeah, it's like you're playing, but it's also like you play poker or something. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess he could have a straight flush, but probably he doesn't. And then of course, every now and again he's got the straight flush. So
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just the way it is, with
And
games.
because it's a rogue or a roguelike game, you're obviously much more forgiving. You're like, yeah,
Exactly.
well, I'm here. I've signed up for this.
Yes,
I know what
exactly.
I've gotten myself into, so I
Yeah,
might as well, yeah, I might as well kill Artorias
yeah. That's
because
right.
I've chosen to do
With
this.
my butter knife. Yes. All right. Do you have any more?
No, I kind of like combined two there in
Yeah.
my last one, so
Yep.
I don't really think, yeah, I don't really
Okay.
think I
Yeah.
have
The last one. Then I just want to say is text is supremely flexible. You just
Oh
lest
yeah,
we forget.
nice. Yeah.
Is just it's because we talked about other games of this era. With Advent, of course, but also we mentioned the Star Trek and Hunt the Wumpus and other sorts of games. It's just like you can do an awful lot with little. It's and I just referenced cards as well. It's like you can do a lot with a deck of cards, or a couple of dice, right? I mean, there's a lot of space in design with even the simplest elements, and this game this early just like is a supreme reminder that, like, yeah, if you've got text you kind of have everything you need,
Mm-hmm.
because we can project so much onto it. And there's a game we're talking about playing later in this year where that is stretched to the absolute limits, I think. So it's something we'll talk about when we get there. We're actually going to look at other text games this year, so it's kind of going to be a little mini theme here for a little while, to kind of look at different things. So we won't talk about what those are, but we are going to sort of see what the flexibility of text is in those. So that was my final takeaway.
Yeah.
So
Good. Yeah.
let's move then to email. We haven't had a review in a while, so I know people are still getting their resolutions done, and we're willing to give a little leeway. But if you use an app that has reviewing capability, go ahead and throw one our way. We'd love to read them on the air. Let's go ahead and hit that email from devgameclub@gmail.com from Mystery Dev.
All right. In the years since Rogue, the roguelike formula has been applied in part or in whole to a multitude of games. However, elements are more easily synergized with some genres than others. I was curious your thoughts on what a roguelike take would look like for something with a less obvious fit. Dating sim, Animal Crossing, sports, etc. Furthermore, a few years ago, it seemed like every developer was being directed to shoehorn roguelike elements they were making, into whatever they were making. What are some reasons to not put such elements in a game? Regards, Mystery Dip. Thanks, Mystery, as ever, asking the hard questions, right?
Yeah, of course.
Without us.
I should have read that email, so you had to go first.
Yeah.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. I think that the things that don't adapt well to, or elements that don't mix well, are obviously the sort of traditional storytelling types of things, and especially comedy. Now, I do think roguelikes can be very comic, but not in a like set up punchline sort of way. They're comic because of unexpected combinations of systems. In Spelunky, in particular, there's just this clockwork where you got shot by an arrow that threw you into a spike, which set off a bomb that, it's like this series of bad things happen to you. that you never could have predicted looking at the individual elements, um, and you laugh, but it's not like Ron Gilbert's types of laughs, right? Where it's you
Yeah.
know intelligence and timing and setup. Maybe you've seen some situation like those things are very difficult to do systematically, and so that's kind of the obvious, like, well, if it has to be linear, then it shouldn't be a roguelike, I guess is my answer there. And I think that comedy, specifically of the, like, you need the context for the comedy is, I think slapstick is good for this, for roguelikes, but other types of comedy are not, I guess. Irony, dramatic irony doesn't really work either, for the same reason. So, uh, that's kind of my
Yeah.
my quick answer as far as that goes.
Well, something that you need like dramatic pacing on too, that you
Yeah,
want some sort of control over. Yeah, where you have like, yeah, it's kind of hard to do. Physics, comedy always works. Like to your point of slapstick, right? Like physics in games is often can create a lot of
exactly.
funny.
Yeah,
There's whole games based on that.
yeah, yeah.
Goat
Go,
Simulator
yeah,
maybe
Goat
is one of
Simulator.
those. Yeah.
Yep, yeah, yeah. That game's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, and there's definitely, um, there are definitely games that I think, uh, with less obvious fits. I mean, you mentioned sports, and I don't like. I'm sure there's a way to do that, that makes it roguelike. I'm thinking of, what's his name, Zach, this indie developer,
Zach Gage. No,
Zach Gage,
Gage.
Gage.
Yeah.
He made a game which was like a chess thing where, like, you had to
Yeah.
discover the rules as you played.
Yeah.
So it was like a roguelike about the rules of chess, basically. And I feel like, there's another guy, and his name I'm definitely not going to remember, but he made like Hoplite. He's made a lot of like mobile games, um, and I can't remember his name because it's been some years since I played any of them. But he made 986 hack as well, or something like that. 976 hack, something along those lines. They made a bunch of these games that had sort of other weird roguelike, things that had these, like really interesting constraints. Like, okay, it's a 4x4 board that's got like a movement mechanic, and it's sort of like a little dungeon, but it's only 16 squares, right? And these are the kinds of elements that can be in there, and like they're just these interesting, variants. Um, so those are sort of like sports like, and
Mm-hmm.
analogies. Like chess is sort of sports like in a way, I guess is my point, because it's so highly, you know, it's so regulated. But like, I guess you could probably do something with sports. I just like, what would it be? Would it be like, okay, but on the third play, you're only allowed to throw the football backwards, like, or whatever. It's like, what changes over time? Do you have to react to conditions on the ground? It's sort of like what they did with, I forget I guess it was Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, where they added weird rules into each battle. It's like, so you go into this battle, and then it's like, yes, but you
Mm.
can't use fire magic, right, or whatever. It's like, do this battle without doing this. Like, so it's like you can only run, but you can't run for more than 6 yards. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it would look like in a sports game. I am not a designer. Tim should answer. Why am I answering this question?
You are too. I mean, um, I I mean, while you were talking, I just been racking my head on both questions, and I feel like to also start with the second question first. I mean, I think maybe it's a cop out answer, but I don't think there is anything that shouldn't be used. Or wait, is that the second answer? Or oh yeah, oh no, that was the second one, was about
Yeah,
why was it a trend? But um I just think it could be anything could be applied. Roguelike could be applied to anything.
yeah,
On the sort of like, why was it I can't actually speak either directly to why it was a trend, but I do think to Brett's earlier point about the wave of roguelikes that happened, especially with the indie space, because it is sort of such a nice match made in heaven on, team size and efficiency, and then you're, kind of bang for your buck. I don't have evidence of this, but I could totally see um, publishers or anyone who's footing the bill saying things like, "Hey, these games are doing really well. You could potentially make something with a lot fewer people, but still the bang for buck being pretty high." You know what I mean? And
Right.
encouraging that sort of like thinking outside the box sort of approach versus like, let's just make another linear single player game where
Right.
it's bespoke and
Well,
everything. Yeah,
the other mercenary reason, of course, is retention. Right? Is that a
yeah,
game like this where
replayability.
there's
Yeah,
we often say like, well, it'd be cool if you could replay the game, like, but then you make a bespoke story based game, and it's like, well, why would you ever replay it? Like, I'm sure there have been games where we've talked about that. Like, Deus Ex is a good example. Great game that I've played twice, right? Once for the podcast and once when it came out. Um, and even knowing that I could play it in a bunch of different ways, I was like, well, yeah, but you know, yes and no, right? I mean, it's like I'm still going to end up sort of
yeah.
at the same place, right? I mean, it's still going to be the same series of levels,
Surprises. Yeah,
right? And so a lot of the things that really appeal to me, are not. Like that said, I still would like to play Prey again, right? And I have played um, what is the
Dishonored.
Dishonored. Yeah, I played Dishonored 1 at least twice through, and Dishonored 2 I feel like I played twice through as well. Yeah, I did. So, I've done this. Because of, I was really curious because it seemed like, but in those cases it's like there are these big clear differences, and there's still like just this limit of number of paths you're going to probably take to the game, unless it really really grabs you, that the systems are that grabby for you that that particular game works for you. That's not going to be everybody. I think roguelikes have the like, okay, if it grabs you even a little, like now you're stuck for a while because you're exploring the algorithmic space, and like, you know it's not a game you're going to return. Like, I guess on PC people don't return games a lot anymore, because we all buy digital versions. But back when you were buying a thing in a box, having something that you were going to hold on to it for at least one more week was a big advantage. So, um,
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like I have a with Mystery's question. I have sort of flashbacks on the RPGification of genres too, and the
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
cross
I thought the
pollination
same
of like,
thing. Progression mechanics. Yeah,
yeah, like whoa, you're adding RPG elements to your first person shooter. Like that's so profound. It's like I'm saying that very snarkily. I apologize, but but it's just a common thing, and I'm gonna definitely stretch this really too far. But to your point on immersive sims, like when you just take the sort of the run based elements of roguelikes or
hmm
rogue games. I mean, when I play immersive sims, I sort of am doing that. If I die, like I go through and I do things a different way, and it's not
true.
it's not like they're giving me procedural elements and things are that different, but depending on how you define, just like when you depending on how you defined RPG elements, depending on how you define roguelike elements, like I think if we really dug deeply, I think we'd be surprised at how many games actually leverage some concept of that, even though we call them like an immersive sim something totally different. But
Right.
this concept of like there's these toolbox, this is toolbox you have, and you're going through, and it's difficult enough to where you might try some spaces differently, or they let you reset, and you're like, okay, I'm going to try that again. And then I don't know, like is the logical progression there, which I haven't played yet, is Deathloop, which
Mm.
is run based as well and is a roguelike
Sort
ish or
of. Yeah.
something. But
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's placed in the same places, but like there is a run aspect to it for sure. Yeah,
I mean, as soon as you say run based, it's like, well, okay, it's not a roguelike maybe
yeah,
explicitly,
yeah.
but it's
No, it's definitely
definitely
taking some.
influenced.
Yeah, it's definitely got the influence. Yeah, I agree with that. So, all right. Well, I think we've stretched all of that about as far as it's going to go without
Yeah,
napping.
yeah, yeah.
So let's turn to our outro. Thanks for sending us that email at devgameclub@gmail.com. As I mentioned, I already threw out about the reviews. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at at Dev Game Club, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Which is also where you are twitching at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. And have you yet slain the King of Cinders, or what's going on?
I am fairly confident that I will be doing it tonight.
Wow. Okay, so you missed it. Watch the VOD. It's too late for you. You should join our Discord, where you'll see the announcements when he goes live. And if I return to streaming sometime soon, you will also see it there. You can join that. If you just go to our Twitter feed, there are links. I think they are permanent links. If not, just ping me and I will reply and say, here's a new one. Because I'm a total...
There's a lot of good discussion on that thing, too. I appreciate everyone who's joined.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a few dozen people. It's already a lot of fun. I pop in there a few times a week and interact with folks and chat about things, and people are playing along. So if you like to play along with the cast and would like to have discussions, that's another avenue for you. It is a book club in a sense, right? We are a Dev Game Club, and it's nice to have a place to go and talk with folks about it. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo and merch store are by Mark Garcia. You can also go to our Twitter, and in the reply to the pinned tweet, you can find the link to the merch store there. Have fun polishing your amulet of Yendor this week, and good night.
Good night.